Will we continue to embrace truth, justice, peace, and a path to prosperity? I believe that America's best days can still be ahead, and I want to lead us forward. Join me now in the Read Revolution.
Hey, happy Monday to you, and glad you are with me here on the Read Revolution. Whether you're in Richmond or you're in Northern Virginia, down in Virginia Beach, we're going to break the internet pipeline with a couple of kind of high-profile guests from Virginia Beach this morning, and folks across the country who I was surprised to get some emails over the weekend from friends of mine, I guess people I've met along the way, who were watching this not live every morning, but later in the morning as they go to work in Los Angeles. And, you know, in Richmond, we complain if it's a 15-minute commute to work that turns into a 20-minute commute to work. That's a real impediment and inconvenience. In L.A., they got the whole hour to sit and listen to the broadcast in the car. So wherever you are watching this morning, very glad you were with us. I hope that you did what I did for most of the weekend and kept the television off, because, you know, there is a point at which you have to disconnect from the pipeline of turmoil and hostility and hatred and violence. If you're a normal person, if you're, you know, if you've got kids, if you've got a family, if you want to live a happy life, you just can't indulge this 7 days a week. And so this weekend, I had the opportunity to go to a place way out in Goochland County called Rassawek. I don't know if you've heard of it. If you're around Central Virginia, maybe you have. They have two big festival events, and I don't know what to compare it to. You know, maybe the old concept of a hunting lodge where you go 45 minutes, an hour outside of the city, and you get a log cabin and you start a fire, and you know, it was raining on Saturday when we got there, so we kind of took little carts around and a bus around and saw all the interesting sights at Rassawek. The gentleman who's put it together has started assembling, you know, like at some point I'll give you a little tour of this office. I collect, much to the chagrin of Alonzo, I collect lots of bricks and photographs. Like here's a George Washington and Martha Washington print that's over 100 years old, and I found those on eBay. And then I've got a brick from Abraham Lincoln's tomb, and I just, for $1.99 on eBay, $1.99 on eBay, the shipping was more expensive, I got a tiny little piece of the Washington Monument to hang on the wall. And I thought that was kind of exciting. You know, it's not backbreaking, it's not going to cost a fortune, but it just, a collection of bric-a-brac, right? Stuff that's kind of interesting. Bust of Theodore Roosevelt that's 70 years old, of Ronald Reagan, you know, neat things like that. This guy has gone around and found old locomotives that have been decommissioned and brought them to his property. And one of the things that I'm so excited about, you can look on Airbnb and actually stay in the train that he's assembled on the property. One of the cars was the car that took Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry Truman around on the East Coast. There were a couple of cars that did it. One of them is on display at some train museum down in Florida. But we walked in, he said, "Oh yeah, this is the car that took the president around." And I thought, oh my gosh, if you hung a little presidential seal and you put some black and white photos of that, I'm sure people would want to stay in this car. It was really, really exciting for me, as kind of a history guy, to see these pieces of American history kind of assembled in no particular order. There's not a theme. You come around the corner, there's a train track with a train on it. Then you go around here, and there's a museum with one of the old bateaus from the James River that people would use to transport tobacco that's under a roof so that it won't deteriorate. I just thought it was really fascinating. So it was raining on Saturday. Sunday was beautiful. Lots of sunshine. Yesterday, just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I can imagine if you did the Airbnb thing and stayed for a week, you could go fishing and I think it's 2,000 acres. It's amazing, Rasowick. So check it out if you've been looking for a nice escape and something that's really unique that everybody else in the world hasn't done, that doesn't cost a fortune and isn't a plane flight away. But one of the things that hit me while I was there, and they don't even have Wi-Fi. Now that's a problem for somebody like me, no Wi-Fi. So there's just enough of a cell signal where I could get text messages, but it felt good to disconnect from the insanity of what's happening all across the country, the insanity of what was happening in downtown Richmond. I mean, you once again, we have something that has occurred in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and uh, I'm just going to say it: the Democrats, the leftists, who have now overtaken the normal Democrat Party, they want to personalize and localize everything that they don't like that happens somewhere else in the country. So you have this woman who is deliberately taunting the cops, stopping her car, interfering with the ICE um, operations in Minneapolis, very deliberately. I mean, this whole thing about, oh, I'm just watching. No, you're not watching. You're engaging in it. You're trying to cause trouble. You're deliberately interfering here, which is illegal. I mean, you just can't, you can't do that. I can't do that. If I get ticked off at something Abigail Spanberger does in a couple of weeks, I can come on the show and talk about it. I can write an op-ed. I can put something on Facebook. I can call one of the legislators down at the Capitol. I can go to the hearings at the Capitol. I can stand on the sidewalk, I guess, if I, don't have anything better to do with a stupid sign that insults people. If you think that's going to win anybody over, you can do all of those things. But what you can't do is go run your car up onto Capitol Square and disrupt what's happening at the Capitol, or go try to run down the governor, or do something crazy. You just can't do that. It's a civilized society, hypothetically. You can't do that. And so the Democrats are taunting. I mean, I think it's kind of manipulative and horrible that the people who pull the strings and have the finances in the Democrat Party are encouraging this behavior from their followers. I'm not. And I'm mad as hell about a lot of things. But I'm not telling you to go into the streets and interfere with things. We got a big inauguration coming up on Saturday. I'm not telling people to go down to the Capitol and interrupt the inauguration. I don't think that would be right. Now, I'm kind of old-fashioned Virginian. I'm not happy about the inauguration. Clearly, in my situation, I'm not happy with the results. I'm a little bitter about it, to be honest with you. But I don't think it's cool. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's right to go and insult and ridicule and disrupt other people with what they're doing, even if I'm not happy about it. I don't know. Maybe that's the way I was raised. I just think in a civilized society, that's not the way. You got to beat people at the ballot box. You got to beat them in the war of ideas. And there's something really nefarious that has grown. I think it's in the last decade. You could see it coming previous, but in the last decade, it's grown where we've conditioned people, especially people who are under 40. I'm 55 now, so whatever that, I don't know where that puts me on the timeline of civility or not. But I think you begin to see people under 40 have been conditioned to think that it's acceptable not to make an intellectual argument about things they care about, but to go into the streets. And that's how you win people over. And I have to repeat this over and over and over again. It is not a Martin Luther King demonstration. These are not demonstrations led by people who want peace and who want to make a statement, and they want to change the hearts and minds of their fellow citizens so that they can change the culture and the society for the better. That's not what's happening. Do you see the distinction? All these people say it's an American tradition to protest. Don't get confused. There is no Martin Luther King out there. And what you're seeing in the streets, where people are setting things on fire and attacking cops and putting themselves not so much in harm's way, but attempting to harm other people, that's a different mindset than what we witnessed in the 60s. And we should be very clear about that. This is an insurrection. This is what the Democrats promised, right? When Trump first won. And it didn't have to be Trump. It would be with any Republican president going forward. You could get, Franklin Graham, Mr. Christian pastor, to become president, and they would still call him Hitler, and they would still go out into the streets, and they would still behave this way. So don't make it all about Trump, who has his own issues in the way he presents himself, which antagonizes and angers people. I don't know what to do about that. That's just who he is. Whoever the president is, this is the way they're going to behave, and they're going into the streets, and they're behaving in a lawless manner. And they've been telling you, we will have a bureaucratic resistance to anything we don't like. Well, that's illegal. You can't work for the federal government and tell the elected officials, screw off. I have no intention of doing what you tell me to do. I'm going to slow roll it, or I'm going to undermine you from inside the government. That bureaucratic resistance, they have promised to do that, and they're doing it. And we should not tolerate that. If you don't want to do the work, if you hate your boss, you hate the political positions, then quit. I respect that. I might disagree with you, but I respect it if you walk out the door and say, to hell with you, I don't want to do that. Okay, fine. But what you can't do is sit there and get a memo from the White House that says this is the new policy, and then you tear it up and say, just, I'm not going to do that. And then I'm going to do things to undermine you. And I'm going to file a lawsuit to undermine you. That we should not be tolerating. And here's where it steps into a much more nefarious place. And this is what I hope you tuned out this weekend, but you better get back in the game starting today. We're going to show you some of the stuff that's been happening. There's an armed resistance happening, not just a bureaucratic resistance, an armed resistance that's happening across the country. And it is led by socialists and communists and anarchists who do not want peace, who do not want prosperity, who do not want you and your family or anybody else to do well. They want to bring down the society. Why? That's a pretty bold statement. They want to bring down the society because they know that a poor, collapsed society can be easily reconfigured with the dream that they have of socialism and communism, which has failed everywhere it's been tried. Everywhere it's been tried. This isn't anything new. No one has, this group isn't a philosophical society that has been pondering and reading thousands of books about American history, world history, the ancient Greeks. They've come up with something new that they think will work to bring prosperity to the masses. That's not what we're doing here. It's a power play, and it's a rehash of things that have killed millions of people and have destroyed very wealthy, successful societies. And we're getting suckered into going along with it because we have some sense of decorum and tradition and decency. And that's a problem for us. So, if you're a mom or a dad or a grandparent, I encourage you to take the weekend, unplug, go to Rassawick or a state park, or take a fantastic trip and clear your head. But then when the week comes back, you better be paying attention to what's happening, because your country and your society is being overtaken right in front of your face. And, we're 10 years into this now. So if you were hoping that if we just behaved and if we were the ones that kept everything normal and we didn't lash out and we were calm, that everything would eventually shake out and return to normal, I don't know what to tell you. I hate this, but it doesn't seem like that's working. I think it's getting worse. Don't you? Here, let me show you some pictures from Richmond. I know we've got a lot of people who are watching who are not from Richmond, and I've gotten some emails like, "Oh, you can't do this show and just focus on Richmond." Well, Richmond's where I live. Richmond's the state capital of Virginia. Richmond's an important American city, one of the oldest cities in the country. And I'm not going to say how goes Richmond goes the United States. I don't think it's that dramatic, but we see video from New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and Miami. When you get to a city like Richmond, which is a political capital, I think that's significant. That this is an expansive operation to destabilize things. Let's show these pictures. It's from Style Weekly. I don't think they're big fans of mine, although I've always liked Style Week. Look, this is the stuff that was happening in Richmond on Saturday. They had another protest on Sunday, I think. Scott Elmquist is the photographer who I think captured this, who I've always liked. He's always been super nice to me. I used to see him at breakfast out here in the West End on an occasion. I'm getting the impression that we don't necessarily agree politically, but he's always been very nice to me. So I try to return that favor. But look at this stuff. There is an organization that Republicans better get a hold of to kind of match what's happening here. And one thing I'll say, I don't think those ladies were getting paid. I don't think that's George Soros money on display here in Richmond. They, for whatever reason, are passionate enough that they'll go stand out in the rain in downtown Richmond. Most of my friends won't go to downtown Richmond to have a drink or go to a concert because they're worried that they're going to get shot in the parking lot or robbed. But these women on a Saturday are willing to stand in the rain with with what looks like a homemade sign, trashing ICE. So who do you think is more passionate about winning here, them or us? I have to tell you, if our guys can't bother to get out and vote in November, like, I don't like this, Trump will take care of it, or I don't like the candidates, they're not perfect. I don't, they're not exactly who I like, and I got other stuff to do. I mean, if that's your attitude, get ready, because you're going to be taken over by the people who are willing to stand in the rain on a Saturday, on a pretty cold Saturday, and have influence over the society. I mean, that's not my thing to go stand out in the cold. I'll do a show like this, but I'm just not going to go do that. But they're willing to, and we're going to get clocked if we don't get in the game here. And so over the course of the next several weeks and months, I think we got to come up with a game plan to counter that. I mean, that's kind of passive. It gets attention because the media gives them attention. If you had a counter protest, seriously, with a bunch of Republicans or conservatives, I don't know that anybody would even know about it, because I don't think the press locally or nationally is interested in that. And that's one of the things when I was a journalist that was so frustrating, is I would go into the newsroom and say, oh, this is happening. There's a, pro-life march or something. Oh, and nobody wants to hear about that. I'm like, oh, no, actually, half your audience wants to hear about it. You just don't want to cover it because you don't like it. And that's another thing that's been lost in the country, is that objective mindset that allows you to say, I may not agree with this, or I may not be on board with this, but it's happening and people should know about it if that's my business. That's totally gone, it seems, in the mainstream press. And, we're going to talk to Vicki Manning, who I've been tracking for well over a year now with Restoration News a little bit later in the program. And she's one of the people who's looking at stories that perhaps the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Richmond Times-Dispatch or the Richmond News Leader way back when might have covered, that it doesn't seem like anybody's really interested in covering from a different perspective. And that's why it requires some work for you to actually be educated about what's happening. Just in case you missed it, and I don't want to burn our guests who are waiting for us, former Virginia Governor George Allen and Vicki Manning, who will be with us as we continue this morning. Let's show the ICE body cam footage of the ICE agent who fired the shot that killed the protester who went to ODU, Old Dominion University. So there is a Virginia connection. It's legitimate for the news to be covering that, since she has a Virginia connection. And just in case you were one of the people who was disconnected this weekend, did you see this? Does this provide clarity for you about what happened on the streets in the suburbs of Minneapolis?
Get out of the car.
I mean, that's the quick version of what occurred. And I would say to you, if you were a police officer and you were out enforcing the law, these legitimate laws, not new laws. Donald Trump didn't just take a pencil out and write a new law and suddenly we're enforcing Donald Trump's fantasy. That's not what happened. These are laws that have been on the books for decades that you can't come to the country and overstay your visa. You can't be smuggled into the country, even if you're plucking chickens or even if you're working, in front of some huge retirement community and you're doing wonderful work and you put the flowers in nicely. I'm not mocking you. I'm not ridiculing you. Great that you're doing that work, but you got to be here legally. You got to be here legally. So we're enforcing the law as it exists. The Democrats agreed to, and you've got a woman who's driving an SUV, and she clearly is not going to stop the car. Your colleagues have already told her to stop the car, get out of the car, and there's chaos around you, and she starts moving forward. What is it that you're supposed to do? Allow yourself to be run over? I mean, is that a reasonable thing? Have you been run over by a car? I mean, you can be seriously injured that way. You may not die. You may die. You may not die. I mean, it looks like it's a pretty big vehicle. Is this cool with you? What do you think is going to happen in that? Nothing good is going to happen, and you might, in this situation, wind up dead. And one of the things, let me wrap this up and just tell you, we need to double and triple down on law and order instead of allowing these people to think that they can wear normal, decent society down and we'll go, okay, you win. We'll let you do whatever you want to do. And I think that's the mindset, kind of like these new parents. I'm not a parent, so before you beat me up about not being a parent, I'm going to comment on something that doesn't directly affect me. But I've had a lot of friends and family who have been parents in that critical age where kids are constantly behaving badly. And I've watched in my lifetime it go from, hey, sit down. Your dad is talking. You're going to be quiet. And if you're not, you're going to go in the car and we're going to go home and you're not going to like what happens when we get home, which usually, my recollection, got the kids' attention. And eventually they shut up and they paid attention. The new mindset is, now, little Johnny, will you sit down, please? What is it that you're trying to say? We're over here talking and what is it that you're trying to say? You know which one works, I think? I know which one is the modern manifestation of what we think is appropriate. The modern people think that we're supposed to talk to the child and we're supposed to reason with the child. The child's not interested in that. They're trying to figure out how far they can go. This is not nice to say. These people are trying to figure out how far they can go. And the unfortunate situation is we have a dead woman now because she and her friends are trying to figure out how far they can go. Now, hopefully, we proved you're not going to try to run over a cop and get away with it. I'm sorry she's dead. I don't like that. I think that's terrible. I'm not happy about it. But if you're a protester now, before you go out and assault a police officer or an ICE agent, before you throw your car in front of the moving traffic or before you impede the ICE agents, before you try to run one of them over, maybe you'll think, do you want this to be your last day? Didn't say you couldn't protest, but do you want this to be your last day? Is that kind of behavior acceptable? And we better not be the ones to cave and say, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. This is really awful. I think it's awful too, but I'm doubling and tripling down on law and order. We're not putting up with this. We're going to restore order to the country. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with me, but you're going to behave differently than you're behaving now. Because what's happening at this time is not sustainable for a free society. That's my message to you. And it's very different from what you'll hear, I think, from Abigail Spanberger and the Democrats who are about to take over Virginia. They like this chaos. They're going to exploit it and try to manipulate you. We have to stand up against it. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, Vicki Manning from Restoration News, covering a lot of the stories that nobody else wants to touch in the Commonwealth and across the country. She joins us. We'll talk about a few of her stories in a little bit later in the program. The former governor of Virginia, George Allen, my old boss in the U.S. Senate, will be with us. Quick break. We'll be back with the Reed Revolution. Now, I've been joking that that's where the, $500,000 commercials will go, like at the Super Bowl. Eventually, it'll be big enough where there'll be some amazing sponsors there. But thank you to everybody who reached out last week who wants to support the show either by advertising or donations. I'm figuring that out. And of course, I don't want to ever break the law. I get really nervous. Like during the campaign when people would give me money, I'm like, oh, I don't do the money. I don't want to talk. I don't want to touch the money because I'm not sure what the rules are, and I don't want to be sucked into that. So hang tight for those of you who would like to be sponsors on the program. The numbers are looking good. I mean, knock on wood, after 1 week, I'm appreciative of that. But that's where the $500,000 Super Bowl commercial will go when it's all said and done. All right, Vicki Manning is with us. Now, I had the joy of meeting Vicki at the very start of the campaign, and I was familiar with her work at Restoration News, which is charged, I think, you'll have to tell me whether I'm getting this right, Vicki, with covering some of the stories that nobody else seems to want to cover, and your specialty is investigative news. I would have thought, honestly, after what happened with this 23-year-old who discovered all of the corruption in Minnesota, that every reporter in Richmond and in Norfolk and in Northern Virginia would be falling all over themselves to check and see whether there was corruption in Virginia, financial malfeasance in Virginia. I don't see that happening. Do you?
We have a full team of reporters, John. It's not just me. We have a full team of investigative journalists who dive into things like this. We have reported a lot on Arabella, which I know you're familiar with, from George Soros Foundation, and how they are funding many of these operations. Now, fortunately, Arabella is out of business. Although that money is just being transferred to new organizations. But clearly, we know that many of these protests are organized and they are being funded. They have professional signs. They're in communities around the state and the nation. My husband was out running an errand this weekend, and he called me from the town center and said, there's like 150 people on the street corner over here holding up these stupid signs. And so it is clearly still organized. And, you were talking about how things like this are not being reported in the media. And that's what we are here at Restoration News to do, to report from the viewpoint of that the legacy media is not reporting from.
Well, you talk about the signs. When I was working for George Allen in the Senate, I remember the constant protests. It was the Occupy Wall Street crowd that had different variations of the names. I remember getting off the subway, the metro, at Union Station and walking over to the Senate to start my day and getting spit on by people who were camped out right there near Union Station. I kept thinking, who are these people? Is this just are these homeless people? And why are they so hostile to anybody who's in a suit walking over to the Senate? What do you care where I go to work? Have we determined, since Arabella isn't there, who is actually behind this, or is it layered and hidden so that there isn't a way to go after the people who are funding it? The illegal part of it, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't dug that deeply into this specific one. It seems to be a lot of smaller organizations that are getting their directives from someone. But I think we need to look at, why are these protesters out there? What is their mission? And their mission is obviously to protest against ICE. Well, what does that even mean? I wonder how many of them actually know what ICE stands for and what ICE is doing. I have been covering ICE and illegal alien crimes for about the last 2 years and reporting on them. We actually had a full website and still have it, illegalaliencrimes.com, where I exposed tens of thousands of illegal alien criminals across our nation, including in Virginia. You can click on the state of Virginia, and see the crimes that are taking place in local communities, small towns all across Virginia, where communities are being impacted by these illegal aliens who've crossed our border illegally and then also committed crimes here. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and these amazing law enforcement officers are standing in the gap to protect our communities and from these harmful illegal aliens that I've been reporting on for the last couple of years.
Well, walk me through some of the stories that you've discovered. One of the things that's frustrating to me as a guy who used to work in television news locally and then engaged with the big guys when I was working in Washington is that there seems to be a concerted effort to cover up the root of some of these problems. You know, if somebody is an illegal who is here in the country and they commit a rape, or they're accused of committing a rape or committing a murder, when the story goes out on the radio or the television, there's an effort not to acknowledge the immigration status, as if that's either irrelevant or that there's been a memo that says we don't discuss people's immigration status. Well, I mean, if that is one of the big issues that we're debating right now, I think the public in Virginia and America needs to know, are some of these crimes, not all of them, but are some of these crimes being committed by people who shouldn't be here in the first place? And, you know, we got enough trouble of our own with our own people that we shouldn't be importing this problem. It helps people to understand, A, that it's happening and the gravity of it. What have you discovered as you've been covering these stories?
Well, you're exactly right, John. Legacy media and the local media, they are not reporting that these criminals are here in our country illegally. I had to dig deep to find that. I made Freedom of Information Act requests all across the nation of sheriff's offices to try to get to the bottom of it and expose it. A couple of the ones that stand out in Virginia, one of those was in Richmond, South Richmond. I believe it was in early 2024. An illegal alien was arrested in South Richmond. I think his last name was Beltran. He was pulled over at a traffic stop, and the police officer searched his car and found out he didn't have a driver's license. First off, that's your first clue.
That's a
that
problem.
He's probably not here legally. And the police officer searched his vehicle and found a gun and illegal drugs. And so they arrested him. Well, when the prosecutor got a hold of the case, he gave him this great plea bargain, told the guy that he needed to do community service, and get this, he told him he had to take a gun safety class. So this guy was released back out into the streets, found out that he's an illegal alien from El Salvador, and just a couple of weeks after he was released back out onto the streets, he murdered a man in South Richmond. So that's one of the worst cases I've seen in Virginia of sanctuary city laws causing harm to Virginians. Another case that took place here in Virginia Beach just this last year, there was a family that had hired a handyman to do some work on their bathroom. And one night, the mother heard something coming out of her 11-year-old daughter's bedroom, and she tried to open the door, and the door was locked. The father kicked down the door and discovered a 34-year-old man raping their daughter in her bedroom. Turns out this was another illegal alien from El Salvador who, was, the left, they like to say, well, these are people that we need in our community to work and to fill these jobs. Well, no, we don't. We don't need them here. We don't need pedophiles and rapists here in our nation. And thanks to ICE officers who these leftists are protesting, thanks to these ICE officers, they are getting these horrific criminals off our streets.
And that's the focus of Trump's first tier effort here. I mean, we're less than 1 year into his term, and this is what he told everybody during the election. So don't act like you didn't know about it. We had this conversation during the election. This isn't, a bait and switch or a hidden agenda. Trump said we're going to get rid of people who are here who have already been documented, who are undocumented, but have been documented to commit crimes. And if everybody was that worried about the chaos in the streets, then you would tell prosecutors like the Democrats prosecutor in Richmond, the Democrat mayor, and the previous mayor and current mayor, who I kind of like, the current mayor in Richmond, and Democrat legislators and judges do this in the courtroom. If you find out that somebody is here illegally, let's take care of it in a law and order setting where everybody can see what's going on. But they refuse. So now we're stuck with, and this isn't our choice. This isn't Trump's choice. This isn't the law enforcement's choice. We're stuck having to do this on the street because the establishment that is run by Democrats doesn't want to enforce the law. And I think they actually are enjoying the chaos. They're appreciating the fact that they get to show this video to the public, trying to inflame tensions rather than be responsible and be a law and order society. Is that out of line for me to suggest?
You're exactly right. It is inflaming the public. And if you're only listening to CNN and MSNBC or whatever it's called now, you're not going to know that ICE officer feared for his life, and that he had been involved in a situation like this not long ago where he was dragged down the street by a vehicle and ended up in the hospital. Another story that I just published, John, on restoration-news.com on Friday is about the Old Dominion University president, Brian Hemphill. He's another one that is inflaming this rhetoric, in my opinion. Let me read to you the statement that Brian Hemphill put on the Old Dominion's website. Now, Rebecca Good, the woman that was shot, was a 2020 graduate of Old Dominion University. I'm an alumni of that school as well. And here's what President Hemphill said. Quote, "This is yet another clear example that fear and violence have sadly become commonplace in our nation." He went on to say, "Indeed, this tragedy reflects the deep strain being felt in countless communities across our nation. As citizens, it is our duty and right to call upon leaders and officials to restore civility in all facets of our lives, especially at the hands of those who are entrusted to protect and serve." Now, when I read that, I just couldn't believe it, because I really felt like he was throwing law enforcement under the bus there. And
I don't know how you read it any other way, to be honest with you.
I know. I mean, this woman did not have deep ties to our community. I'm sure he didn't know her. 100,000 people have graduated from that school at least since 2020. Yet he decides to memorialize and eulogize this woman. I was just
with a
absolutely
political
shocked.
statement. It wasn't just, whenever something bad happens to somebody from our community, our hearts go out to their family. And I mean, there could have been a generic acknowledgement if you felt like you needed to do that. But I don't see how you read it any other way, that it is hostile to the mission that law enforcement's on, and it completely neglects that. I mean, I'd be embarrassed if I were the school president and one of my graduates had done this. This is one of the things that frustrates me, Vicki. The idea of going and getting a college degree is that you don't act like a street vagrant who has no college degree. You're able to articulate yourself. You're able to write and read and convince other people that your position is legitimate and maybe change people's minds. That's the point, I think, of getting a college degree, is that you are able to communicate, understand, reason with logic, and communicate with other people and win them over to your side. Everything that's happening right now is so base and vulgar and low level that I would be embarrassed if I was a part of higher education to say, oh yeah, these are the people that we've educated over the last 20 years. And now look at the result, chaos in the street, instead of magnificent orators and thinkers who are able to convince the population that we're on the wrong track and bring them back. Why do you think I'm doing this? Instead of being an agitator in the street. I would like to convince people with language and thought and logic instead.
Well, you bring up a great point that I could talk about for hours and hours, but the woman that was killed, Rebecca Good, she was a graduate of ODU, and I believe her specialty was in poetry. And I recently read, I think Andy Ngo, or another investigative journalist, discovered that Good's mother was paying her bills. So clearly that college degree that she got from ODU wasn't being put to use by paying her own bills if her mother was doing that for her. So yeah, I could talk all day about the meaning of a
What
college
we're
degree
doing
this year.
with higher education, are you
Yeah.
in a situation where you can pay your own bills and live a decent life? I mean, not to speak ill of a dead woman, which of course is also a traditional mindset, right? There's several people who've died recently where I have restrained myself, like, you know what? They just died. I have strong feelings about them and what they did and what they didn't do. But decent people don't go out and trash someone right after they die. Especially non-political people just don't do that. That's gauche and inappropriate. They don't worry about that on the left. And I do think objectively, let me do the light touch. If you actually look at this lady who is deceased and you examine where she was and where she is at the moment of her death, there are a lot of things you could point to that are red flags. Like, this isn't a stable person who's making good, responsible decisions. And unfortunately, in this case, one of her bad decisions caught up with her, and now she's dead. And it should be a lesson to everybody else. Don't repeat this. Let's not all be like the celebrities yesterday, be good, acting like they want to emulate her. No, that's really bad advice. You'll wind up in a bad situation too.
Yeah, she was clearly brainwashed by politicians like Mayor Fry of Minneapolis and Governor Tim Walz, who paint ICE as the villain, rather than out there sacrificing their lives in some cases to protect us and make our communities safer.
Well, keep bringing us these stories that nobody else seems to want to touch. I think that's important. Vicki Manning, it's Restoration News, restoration-news.com. If you want to check out Vicki's latest work, she's also on Facebook, so you can read her work there. Vicki, I hope you'll come back and join us again. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Absolutely. I'd love to, John. Take care.
Thank you. All right, let's take a quick break. Standing by is the former governor of Virginia, George Allen, when we return in about 20 seconds on the Reed Revolution. Monday morning on the Reed Revolution, and we got an all-star lineup. And joining me now is the former governor of Virginia, George Allen, my former boss when he was in the United States Senate. Governor Allen, good morning to you. I appreciate you coming on. I guess you were eavesdropping there on this conversation. Let me get your reaction to it right off the bat.
Well, unfortunately, I got cut off for whatever reason on whatever your conversation was.
Well, I'm still glad you're here.
I'm glad to be with you. Somehow, technical difficulties had me cut off.
Those things do happen. All right, let me switch to my next topic, which is pretty important. We've got an inauguration coming up on Saturday. Governor Youngkin steps aside. We have a new governor, Abigail Spanberger. Everybody's so excited. The first woman governor in Virginia. We would have had that either way with a Republican or a Democrat. That's important to note, I think, in this whole thing. But okay, Abigail Spanberger won. What is your assessment of what we're about to encounter? It's a very different mindset than Glenn Youngkin's mindset, leadership-wise.
Well, obviously so. First of all, Virginians love making history, and so history is being made once again in Virginia. What matters most to the people are what do they do. It's nice, everyone is very cordial. There's sportsmanship. I did hear your opening monologue, so to speak, your take, and there is a sense of sportsmanship, and you don't disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. I know Governor Youngkin leaving office. I know leaving, and I know coming in. The excitement of coming in, the melancholy aspect of leaving. One of the priorities I had leaving, and our chief of staff, Jay Timmons, and others, was to make sure everyone had a job in the private sector if they wanted to stay in public service. And I was writing a lot of letters of recommendation and calling people and saying, vouching for the competence of various individuals so everyone would land on their feet. The incoming governor has a lot of excitement and putting together her team of folks who you would hope are, the way I looked at it, I wanted people who shared my common sense Jeffersonian conservative principles, but I wanted a cabinet of people who knew more than I did in their specific areas of transportation, commerce, or trade. We had Kay James for health and human resources, because welfare reform was a big promise of the audacious number of promises we had in our campaign, and bringing in truth in sentencing, welfare reform, making sure the world knew Virginia was open for business. Governor Youngkin in economic development, his administration was similar to ours. And he used a lot of the same phrases. He understands the competition between the states, and the competition between the states is more fierce now. I think the pandemics accelerated the exodus of people from high cost, high tax states to places that were open and not as restricted as Virginia and states to our northeast were. And the issues still are somewhat the same in that I think the top responsibilities of a state government are education and law enforcement. And education is not just spending, it is high academic standards, accountability, making sure that young people, when they graduate from high school, can read, write, and speak the English language, as well as knowing higher levels of math and science and economics and social studies and history. All of that is very important. And we also wanted to freeze college tuition. In law enforcement, and I think Jason Miyares as Attorney General, as well as Governor Youngkin, thought it was important to keep truth in sentencing, that if someone gets sentenced to 12 years for rape, they're going to serve close to 12 years rather than being released after serving a fraction of their sentence. And the Democrats have been fighting that and trying to release felons from prison early. And they did that during the Northam administration. And so my worry in the future is Virginia be as safe as it could be, because 3 out of 4 violent crimes are committed by repeat offenders. Yeah. The ones who have been released under that early release system, the last number I saw was back in the fall when everyone was campaigning, was 49.8% of them recommitted felonies. And these were manslaughter, murder, assaults, abductions, robberies, burglaries. And so
not stealing food from the grocery to feed themselves, but something bad.
No, these are, there are people who are dead or raped or injured from these folks that were released early. So that is a worry. Now you say, oh gosh, you're for education and law enforcement. Well, the way you pay for it is with a vibrant economy where people are working and businesses are prospering and you get more revenue. And the key criteria, or one of the key issues in Governor Spanberger's election or campaign, was affordability. One of the challenges facing Virginia these days that are different than when I was governor is energy. The energy policies of Virginia are so unrealistic, whimsical, nonsense. And you want energy policy that is reasonable and prudent to provide affordable, reliable electricity to captive customers, to the people. Now, Governor Spanberger has to realize that unfortunately, Virginia these days imports more electricity than any other state in the union. Virginia imports more electricity than any other state in the union. That imported electricity, whether it's from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, or Ohio, costs more than if you're generating it here in our own state. And and then there's people up in Loudoun County complaining about these high voltage power lines going through Loudoun County. Why are they going through there? Because they're having to wheel power, transmit power from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, and those other states. And they have this Virginia Clean Economy Act, which is blissfully whimsical, thinking we're going to get reliable, affordable electricity from sources that are clearly intermittent and
The windmills and the solar
yeah, the wind
panels.
turbine. Well, the only thing more stupid than onshore wind is offshore wind. Putting it out in corrosive sea air, all the transmission lines, the maintenance for it, and at best, it'll work 40% of the time.
So how did we get
And
there?
and it takes up these 176 turbines, wind turbines off Virginia, takes up 176 square miles. If you had a natural gas plant at the same amount of power from it, you could get from about 1.5 square miles for that, and you get reliable electricity 99% of the time rather than 40% of the time. Heck, would you buy a car that only runs 3 out of 7 days of the week?
Right.
And they say, oh, well, you might not be driving those days. Well, no one would buy.
I drive every day. Yeah.
But
so how did we wind up in this situation?
And Governor Spanberger is talking about rejoining the regional greenhouse gas initiative. I call it idiocy. And this is adding 3% to people's power bill to send it to a consortium of northeastern states that have high electricity costs, that are losing population. All of this is supposed to change the weather. And the bottom line is, how does this make electricity more affordable? It clearly doesn't. And so that's, if Virginia wants to be able to compete and attract more business, more investment, more jobs, we're not competing with Maryland and New Jersey and those states. We're competing with North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. And those states have much lower costs of living, costs of conducting business, their income taxes. Tennessee's got zero income tax, as does Texas and Florida and out west in Nevada. And you're seeing people leaving California. They're leaving California for Arizona, whose taxes are substantially less, and Nevada that has zero, and Utah and Idaho. And in our area, you see the southeastern states booming, and Virginia's kind of stagnant, slightly accelerating as opposed to declining in out migration. So there's some challenges if you're going to have affordability. Raising taxes, raising the cost of conducting business, raising electricity prices does not help when you're looking at the competition between the states.
So one of the things that I wrote down when I knew we were going to talk today is a two-part question. What went wrong? If you've got all of this information on the side of Republicans to counter the fallacies of the Democrat proposals, what went wrong last year? Is it all Donald Trump? You can tell me honestly if you think the candidates were a problem. That's part of the. I mean, it would hurt my feelings, but okay. And what once we talk about that, what do we do in this coming year to position Virginia Republicans so that it's not a decade of wipeout here?
Okay, the last campaign, each campaign ended up somewhat running their own campaigns, as you well know, John.
Yes.
You all ran your own campaigns. The campaign, I don't want to, after a loss, I don't think yours was as resourceful grassroots as could be. You were overwhelmed with numbers. Jason Miyares ran a great campaign based on his record of excellent performance as Attorney General, getting us out of the greenhouse gas initiative. And in fact, it was his brilliant opinion that allowed the people of Virginia to decide what kind of car they want to drive. If you want to drive a battery-powered car, that's fine, or hybrid, or gasoline, or diesel, or compressed natural gas, or corn from a jar. That's the choice of free people in a free marketplace of different products. But I do think that the Democrats are very much motivated in their antipathy towards President Trump. That was a factor. The problem was, I don't think that the voters were able to see, all right, here are the differences on a variety of issues, on jobs, on affordability, on the economy, on public safety, and high academic standards, accountability in schools, a variety of issues that simply wasn't prominent in the campaign. People were upset with the higher costs of things, tariffs that were imposed by President Trump, and I think unconstitutionally and unlawfully on these so-called International Economic Emergency Powers Act, putting tariffs or import taxes on every product from every country in the world with no limits on duration of these taxes nor the amount of them. Now, the Supreme Court's going to rule on that, hopefully very shortly, to get clarity on that. But that affected the ports of Virginia. And John, you well know, one of the greatest assets for Virginia are our ports, deep water ports, because of our Navy and so forth. And that losing 10% of commerce affects Virginia's ports. The other key advantage for Virginia is our right to work law. The first words out of my mouth when I was governor, I spent more time on economic development than anything else. And it worked out. We had 312,000 net new jobs created while I was governor. That's still a record, most jobs created in a 4-year term. But the key words out of my mouth, recruiting business to Virginia, was we're the furthest state north on the eastern seaboard with a right to work law, where workers are not compelled to pay union dues as a condition of keeping a job. Now that's gonna be harmed going forward if there's any efforts to whittle that down or harm it. And they're talking about collective bargaining, which means unions, collective bargaining for government workers. That's going to increase the cost of local government. School boards and all will have higher costs. It's costs if you have state government employees in unions. This will only be good for creating jobs for lawyers. It's and it increase the cost of government with no measurable, appreciable improvement in services.
An extreme increase, probably, right?
Oh, sure, millions of dollars. Fairfax County, which is very very liberal jurisdiction, they have collective bargaining, and it's cost them millions and millions more, and they're having to raise taxes up in Fairfax County. And then Governor Spanberger, as a candidate, said she wanted project labor agreements for major Virginia construction projects. A project labor agreement is probably understood by 1% of the people, but that means that they have to be union contracts. Union contracts end up costing 20 to 30% more than if you had a non-union company performing that work. Again, how does that make things more affordable? How are the taxpayers getting more bang for their buck? If you freeze out non-union companies, it'll be great for construction companies out of Maryland or New Jersey to get jobs, construct projects in Virginia, but that's not good for Virginia taxpayers. And again, no appreciable difference in the project in meeting the performance standards and specs of a particular job. So Virginia cannot become the southernmost northeastern state.
Right.
We need to understand that we're competing with Tennessee, that's got zero state income tax. Their gasoline prices, if you go on Gas Buddy, you'll see their gas prices are at least 30 cents a gallon less than Virginia. Their industrial electricity prices are about 40% less than Virginia when you're trying to attract business. North Carolina's income taxes have been ratcheting down, and they are substantially less than Virginia. Their gasoline prices are less, their electricity prices are less. Both these states and all the ones to our southeast are right to work states as well. And you want to have a skilled, capable workforce, which Virginia has. And I think Governor Youngkin, and I think all governors through the years have worked to make sure we have a good workforce. And a lot of that's done through cooperation with community colleges, with the workforce training and so forth. So the states that are winning, John, you've heard this and you know it, is that the states that have comparatively lower cost of conducting business, and that's taxes, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, the cost of electricity and utilities, right to work states, and those who have a skilled, capable workforce, those are the states that are winning. The high cost, high tax, union run states are losing. And in fact, I've said for years, and I try to put in this terms, people and businesses are not trees. Businesses and people, unlike trees, they can and they do move. They move to places where they have a better chance of pursuing their own happiness. And they like to go in places where they can keep more of the bread that they have earned. And so if you keep those foundational principles in mind, and when making decisions as a governor, will this proposal, regardless of partisanship, personalities, any of that, if this idea will make Virginia more desirable, attractive, more affordable for people to invest and make Virginia competitively better, then yes. If not, then no.
Then say no.
And you remember I had a poster when I was governor, especially. I had a big poster of wild horses galloping across the open range. And under it said, you either make dust or eat dust.
Okay.
And you want to be making dust. You just can't be loping along. And because the competition with other states that are constantly and continuously improving and becoming more affordable, more attractive, if you're loping along, if you're standing still, you're falling behind.
Well, one of the things that strikes me during the campaign, I did an event with the governor of West Virginia, and he showed up. I guess somebody invited him. He was super nice. I enjoyed talking to him. But while we were on stage, he said something, hey, take a look at West Virginia. And I thought, wait a minute, buddy. I'm running here in Virginia, and I respect you, but don't start stealing our people. If he was going to do that right on stage with me there trying to recruit business, imagine what he's about to do after next week, where I would think he would send personal letters to every business person who's in that part of the state and say, you know what, you move your operations 100 miles this direction, look at how much you're going to save. And I don't think that Governor-elect Spanberger, soon to be Governor Spanberger, and her team are aware of the devastating impact that could have on Virginia. They're worried about the Northern Virginia contractors and government employees being moved out by President Trump. But the real issue here is going to be those private industries that say, you know what, we've sunk enough money into Virginia, we're going to start shifting to North Carolina, Tennessee, West Virginia, and elsewhere.
Yeah, understood. Two things. First, this is a distraction, but I did hear your monologue on how you collect things from all over.
Oh, yeah.
This. You know what this is? This is a rock from West Virginia.
Okay.
And I also have a piece of the Berlin Wall. I'm going to put this back on my shelf. This rock, every time I go to West Virginia, I get a rock or stone from there because it's an unconstitutionally formed state. Virginia, according to Article 4, Section 3 in the Constitution, a new state, and I've said this to Governor Morrissey, even in the days when he was Attorney General of West Virginia. The Constitution says a new state is to be formed. You need the three predicates for it. Number one, consent of Congress. Two, consent of the new legislature. West Virginia's legislature was simply a trumped up puppet government. But the third criteria is you need the consent of the state from which it's being formed. And Virginia never agreed to giving up a third of its population. And I'd love to see the Virginias reunify as the Germanys did. It won't happen. But you just got me off on that tangent. But you're exactly right that the governors of Tennessee, and it's not that hard for businesses in Southwest Virginia to decide, well, gosh, it's so much. Well, people have done it. People, look how prosperous Northeast Tennessee is. It's booming. Now
they live in Bristol, Tennessee, and may work in Virginia because there's no income tax for them. Right.
And in fact, my favorite store, this jacket's from Blakely Mitchell on State Street in Bristol on the Virginia side. It's my favorite clothes store anywhere. And but during the pandemic, you saw that difference. And the ideal is you live and work in Tennessee where you have no state income tax, the cost of living's less, all of that. but you shop in Virginia because our sales taxes are substantially less
Right.
than they are in Tennessee. Tennessee gets most of their revenues out of sales taxes rather than income taxes. The point is that other states are going to look for these advantages over Virginia. Virginia you're talking about President Trump, and yes, everyone's concerned about the downsizing, efficiencies, accountability in the federal government. And there should be accountability in government. When I was governor, we reduced the state workforce by 10%. But those 312,000 net new private sector jobs benefited.
It. Right.
And they in the state services, the permitting was prompt, working with businesses to get their air or their water permits and so forth. With President Trump's proposal to build up our military, that's going to be very beneficial to Virginia. That is something that Governor Spanberger and her administration, they may not agree on everything, but you got to find specific areas where you can find agreement. And that's if they're building up our military, there's so many great defense production companies, including shipbuilding. Obviously, Newport News Shipbuilding is the largest private employer in Virginia.
But what happens,
if they
Governor?
more battleships or nuclear submarines, that's going to be great for Virginia.
What happens, though, if Louise Lucas and Speaker Scott get their way and they dump out Jen Kiggans and Rob Whitman, who are Republicans, but really go to the mat to make sure that those contracts come to the qualified long-term businesses that are in Virginia? And they've got, the whole thing's based on seniority. As you know, with your time in the Senate, it takes a while to move up the ladder where you can call those shots. And it sounds like Louise Lucas and Don Scott don't give a damn whether you've got people who are experienced who are going to fight for Virginia or not. They just want somebody with a D behind their name in those districts. That could be devastating for us.
Yes, it could. And that should be an issue in the midst of these upcoming campaigns. One of the things that the Democrats are trying to do is rig the system. Virginia, just 5 years ago, 66% of Virginians said they don't like this gerrymandering, where the politicians are picking their voters rather than the people deciding who their representatives should be. It's like going into a hockey game and saying, well, you're going to play one player short in the penalty box for not doing anything right from the start. And so we in Virginia passed a constitutional amendment. 66% of the voters were for it, for an independent bipartisan commission to draw up a level playing field, which means by our Constitution, compact and contiguous districts with communities of similar interests, rather than looking at the state like somebody flung a handful of spaghetti up against the map and you got these districts of split counties, split towns, split precincts, elongated, and in many ways disenfranchising the people in the rural areas, generally speaking, with it. And so I think what Texas and President Trump has been asking Texas to do is wrong. And these mid-census, mid-decade redrafting of districts, it's now getting all washed out because California changed theirs. And so this is going to be a big issue in Virginia coming up, that if the Democrats have come up with maps right now, there's, as you know, 6 Democrats, 5 Republican members of Congress. And
that kind of mirrors the voting population, it seems, if you track the last few elections.
Yeah, you're exactly right, John. And they've drawn up several, I've seen several of these maps that it makes it 10 Democrats, 1 Republican. And this is the sort of thing that Virginians were voted against.
Yeah.
But they're going to try to ram this through, have a special vote sometime in the spring on it. And I think any political party that has to cheat using politically driven, contrived, creative cartography districts, they need to do that to win. They must not have much confidence in the merits of or the popularity of their ideas with the people. So they need to rig the system. And that's just absolutely wrong. It's something that folks in Virginia need to be aware of, that this is going to be a battle and people will be voting on it. And don't wait until the last weeks. I think
to talk about it.
I'm glad we're talking about it right now. To the extent you have a great audience, people who watch the Read Revolution are informed. They're educated. They're interested in politics or policy or ideas, reforms, initiatives. This is going to be a really important one, and it fits into what you're saying, that if you have a 10-1 Democrats and you have a Republican administration, where do you have a seat at the table when you're figuring out appropriations? And there could be worries that, for example, the Florida delegation for years, from the days you and I were in the Senate together, they were all trying to get some air wing sent down or a battle group or move the master jet base to Florida or to Texas.
Whole BRAC commission.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a mess.
And what BRAC is one thing, but yeah, the BRAC was part of it. And in the midst of BRAC, you'd had the Florida delegation really trying to get folks, getting the military to move substantial parts of our armed forces and their bases to Florida. And Texas will want to try to get some, and Huntsville and Alabama could want to get some. And you want to make sure you have a seat at the table. And if they do something like that, that'll be detrimental to Virginia having a voice, a strong voice. And Jen Kiggans and Rob Whitman, if the Republicans somehow keep the House, he's in line to be chairman of the Armed Services Committee.
We should, even Democrats who may not like Rob Whitman and don't like his votes on some of the issues, that's important for Virginia. If he has that role, that is big for Virginia. And there are a lot of Democrats who will benefit from that. I hope they'll contemplate that before they pull the trigger on something that will mess that whole situation up for their voters too.
Well, you want people, what you want is representatives that actually care about all the people, not just worrying about winning a primary in your own party. And that's part of the whole redistricting reform in Virginia, is that you're still going to have folks, there will be strong Democrat districts and strong Republican districts, but you want to have districts, again, that are compact, contiguous, with communities of similar interests, and have more representatives caring about all the people rather than the extremes of one side or the other.
Right.
And I think Jen Kiggans and Rob Whitman are those type of leaders.
I do too.
And if you care about jobs, and you've heard me say this 1,000 times, the best social program of all is a job.
A job.
If someone's got a job, they're taking care of themselves and providing for their families. And if you care about that, and Virginia is highly dependent on the federal government because of all the government employees and the government contracting. And if all these military bases from every branch, whether it's Navy, Air Force, Marines, Army, that is in Virginia, that's a big part of the economy. I know you had Vicki Manning on earlier, also from Virginia Beach. Oceana, jet noise. Jet noise, when you hear it, out of that, you just say, that's the sound of freedom. Now, there's some people don't like that jet noise, but it's really important to the economy.
I quote you on that every time I'm at the beach in Virginia Beach and the planes go over. So, hey, speaking of going over, I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate that you've been willing to talk to me this long, and you've got other stuff to do today. But let me ask you a last question. When I worked for you in the Senate, everybody in D.C., I was very popular because I saw you every day. Oh, George Allen's going to run against Hillary Rodham Clinton for president. Now, of course, we have this new generation of political folks. And tonight, Monday night, Abigail Spanberger, she's not even governor yet. And they've gotten her on the Stephen Colbert show, which doesn't have a huge crossover appeal to middle-of-the-road voters or conservative voters. But that's a big accomplishment from a PR standpoint. Do you think that her people are telling her she's going to be the next vice president of the United States or president of the United States in 28? And also, Glenn Youngkin endorsed J.D. Vance, it sounded like to me. yesterday for 28. That seems a little premature, but maybe I'm stuck in the old-fashioned mindset where you're not supposed to talk about that stuff until, 18 months in advance. What's your take on all of that?
My take on all of this is back to what you asked earlier. And what do Republicans need to do? Republicans need to talk about ideas that are positive, constructive, in ways that improve people's lives in a tangible way. And whether it's their power, electricity costs, taxes, quality of their education, the safety in their neighborhoods, in their communities. Discuss kitchen table issues that normal people care about. And by the way, I heard you talking about normal people. Normal people were watching football, and this was a cornucopia of football games. And think of that meritocracy of sports and how teams have players from different races, different religions, from different places. They're all playing on a level playing field, and you have to win by the rules and not having it skewed one way or the other by the referees and zebras. So my advice to anybody is do the job you're hired on to do. Do that job. If you do that job well, then if some other opportunity arises in the future, you'll be in a position to do so. So it's fine. She's getting on Stephen Colbert's show, I suppose. That is to a narrow batch of people who watch that show. As you might guess, I don't. Right. But for their base, that's a big get. But I think people are going to be judged about how did they make their state safer? How many more net new jobs were created?
Yeah.
Our students, Virginia's lagging, for example, in academics on reading tests. A lot of that was occasioned by the lockdown and closing of schools with the hypochondriac, paranoid leadership we had in Virginia and the timid acquiescence of Virginians following that. This is the state of Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. And we were all locked down. So all of that's part of the excitement, and take those opportunities, but do the job you're hired on by the people of Virginia to do, making us more affordable. And that's going to be the measurement is Virginia, how's Virginia as far as affordability in a variety of areas getting better or worse, and in comparison to the states with whom we compete.
Well, that's one reason I'm excited about this program, is to hold them accountable when I'm not rooting for anybody to fail on that point. But if they make these stupid mistakes with raising the minimum wage excessively and start regulating business again, and then God forbid they get rid of right to work, somebody's got to be out there immediately to call them out on it so that they don't coast by with the mainstream media either ignoring it or acting like it's a good thing. And I'm going to make sure that we raise hell about that. Governor George Allen.
Well, thank you, John, for still being a strong voice for, I call it common sense conservative principles of trusting free people and free enterprise. And unless someone's harming someone else, leave them alone. We don't need more nanny government, more taxes, and more unnecessary regulations. Unless someone's harming someone else, leave them alone.
I think that's a very potent argument that the people of Virginia, even the libertarian-minded and left of center, would embrace. Governor Allen, I appreciate it. Please tell Mrs. Allen hello, and thanks for spending all this time with us.
All right. Thank you, John. Adios, and stay strong for freedom.
We'll do it. All right. We'll be taking a 20-second break. We'll come back with the conclusion of the Reed Revolution on this Monday. Stay with us. What do you think, producer Dan? That was great to have George Allen on. And unlike at WRVA, where I was constantly freaking out because we were moving commercials, and one of the great things about George Allen is he's not just a soundbite guy. He's actually put some thought into this, and he wants to express it. A lot of politicians just take the notes that they've been given by some think tank in D.C., and that's the only thing they can talk about. You just heard him speak extemporaneously for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're just not going to stump the guy. So I'm very thankful for that.
No, yeah, he and I were talking yesterday on the phone while I was headed down to Williamsburg, and yeah, he and actually I was on the phone with both him and Governor Gilmore at different times yesterday. But yeah, both of them very shrewd and very knowledgeable about these issues.
Well, I appreciate that, and hopefully he will become semi-regular. I don't know if everybody's got 30 minutes to spend in the morning to talk to me, but given that we have the inauguration coming up on Saturday, I thought this was a perfect time to talk to him. And we do have Governor Gilmore later in the week, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think he'll be joining us on Thursday, and Tony Pham will be with us tomorrow, as I understand. So,
okay.
Obviously, timely appearance for him.
Well, let's see. I do think that this protest culture is not going away. And I think it's very upsetting and disturbing to the average person who wants to have peace. And the weird juxtaposition.
That was hold on. This was the one I wanted to show. Let's see here. But yeah,
God, where is that?
I think this is all over the place. Just the from this
death
past
to
weekend.
MAGA. That's death to me and to you. And crushed ice melts faster in hell. That's real nice people. And this guillotine thing, I'm just telling you guys, the guillotine is not just a symbol to these people. It's not. Fortunately, you don't follow the same people I do on Facebook, probably, so you're not exposed to this, I hope, because it's disturbing. There is an entire group of people who love, what's his name, Mangione in New York. And they like the idea of killing people that they disagree with, who they turn into villains. And if you're a CEO, if you're wealthy, look, remember in 2020, I think it was 2020, when the BLM Antifa rioters were constantly doing stuff in downtown Richmond. It was one thing when it was on Monument Avenue. Their goal was to get rid of the statues. Now, they went after old people. There are a couple of people who are still on Monument Avenue who refuse to talk to the police, and I've invited them on this program, invited them on WRVA and this show. They won't come on and talk about it. They were hit in the head in the back of their house on Monument Avenue, had to go to the hospital, and refused to talk because they thought our house is going to get burned down. They attacked me now. They'll kill me next time. And if you live in the suburbs like I do and you feel a certain sense of safety, good for you. You didn't buy in a Democrat-controlled area. You were smart, because the Democrat-controlled areas all across the country are hellholes. They've got great architecture, and yes, they're wonderful restaurants, and there's some bars that are a lot of fun. I mean, I lived at Lombardi and Grove, and it was fun in my 20s and early 30s. But, oh, hell no, I would not be there now, because you get crosswise with people. They'll kill your dog. They'll set your house on fire. They'll attack you. And this guillotine motif, which we keep seeing repeated, is a warning to you that they're not kidding about killing the people that they don't like. And at what point do you wake up? When they come in your front yard? They did that to Tony Pham, who will be with us tomorrow. Walking around with severed heads with fake blood running out of them that say ICE. That's not just theatrics. That is a warning to you. And you can respond to it in a couple of different ways. You can curl up in a ball and cry and pretend it's not happening and just hope it will go away, which honestly, I think that's what most people have done for the last decade, and it hadn't worked. You can confront it and double and triple down on law and order and support the police, even when something really bad happens, like the death of a protester. I mean, I'm sorry, she put herself in that situation. I feel bad about it because I'm actually a decent person. I don't like that happened. But quite frankly, she put herself in that situation, and we need to use it as an example to people. There are limits to what you can do if you disagree with the government, if you want to keep your life. You can't go out and attack other people. You can't impede other people, and you sure as hell can't attack the cops. And we have got to draw some lines here. We got to be like those parents I was talking about earlier who jerk their child. I mean, you're not allowed to do it now, I guess, and say you are not going to behave this way in the restaurant, and there's going to be consequences if you do. Do you understand me? Versus the passive, let's all try to get along thing, which is backfiring on us. And every time you see one of these guillotines, that's not theatrics. That is a warning that they're coming for you. And I'm not going to let that happen. If I have anything to say about it.
No, and I was writing about this over the weekend. Somebody wrote a response to me on social media and said, let's see, at no point, because I compared, as I did last week, the would-be vehicular assassin in Minnesota to the actual vehicular assassin from Charlottesville from 2017, and somebody responded, let's see, at no point was the Charlottesville driver approached by men with masks and guns trying to open up his door. Well, the guy in Charlottesville, at least this guy had that going for him, that he wasn't interrupting an active law enforcement situation or scene. That's why the guys with masks and guns were approaching this woman, was because she was interrupting and interfering with a law enforcement situation. I mean, come on. I mean, it gets back to the same thing.
What are they saying? I'm sorry, I'm not following that.
They said that
you
the guy
want
in
the cops to
Charlottesville-
interrupt that? If you thought he was about to run a protester over,
Yeah.
would you want the cops to
Yes,
show up
no
in
kidding.
mass or else? I mean,
No kidding.
First of all, from a law enforcement standpoint, what that person's saying makes no sense.
No.
And quite frankly, here's your test. Here's your test about who you are as a person. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated on live TV, and we all watched the horror of him going limp right there, did you feel bad for him, even if you didn't agree with his politics, or were you excited about it? I felt bad for him. I agree with most of his politics. I felt bad about it. And all he was doing was standing there talking to people who disagree with him. When the situation happened in Charlottesville, I didn't agree with that lady who was run over by the car, but I thought it was awful that she died.
Yeah.
I thought it was terrible. I don't like that. I don't want that.
And the guy who did it was no good. I mean, he was a bad guy.
When you see an assassination attempt against Donald Trump, did you cheer for that, or were you appalled by it? I was horrified by it. I said the same thing when Bill Clinton was on one of these tours around the world, and I guess the security kind of broke down and the mob surged to him, and it looked like he might be in danger. Now, I wasn't a Bill Clinton fan, but I thought, oh my God, it's the president of the United States. We can't have this kind of thing happening. And I don't know whether they're fans or whether they're going to try to harm him, but we can't have those kinds of things happening. If your reaction to harm being done to other people changes based on their political connection, I'm not talking about whether you win or lose at the ballot box. I'm talking about whether someone is physically harmed or killed. If it changes based on their political party, you're the problem. Here we go. If you're okay with the young blonde-haired white woman being murdered, being stabbed in the neck on the train in North Carolina, well, that's an aberration. Let's not talk about that. That's uncomfortable. If that didn't really bother you, but you're outraged that some woman who's out protesting, who drives her car into the street to block the street, and then whether she I'm saying, watching the video, she deliberately wanted to get away and take this guy out. Mm-hmm. If that bothers you, but the other didn't, you're part of the problem. I can tell you honestly, without making anything up, I don't like any of this. This isn't the civilized society that I grew up in. And we got to get back to that place where there's civilized decency, even amongst people who disagree. And we're losing that fast. I'm willing to stand up and try to call for it to return. I'm not saying you have to agree with me. Understand. You don't have to buy my position on taxes. You don't have to buy my position or George Allen's position on right to work. You don't have to agree with me that the trans stuff is insane. I think it's totally nuts and is ruining the culture and proving everything that Jerry Falwell said was true, which infuriates me that the gay community is turning that. You don't have to agree with me on all this stuff. But if you're out there saying, oh, it'd be great that John Reed is dead, or it would be great that somebody who thinks like John Reed is dead or harmed, I think you kind of need to check where you are and what kind of society you want. I want a peaceful, prosperous society for everybody, including the people who don't agree with me. Can you say the same thing? Honestly,
I know that I can, but I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of I don't think a lot of the other people who were out there protesting against ICE this weekend maybe think that way. So yeah.
So what's the appropriate? There are a couple of people I've known who we've had on the show back in the old radio days, Dan,
Mhm.
who, how do I say this delicately? I think they're ready to go to war, and they've just kind of backed off, and they're sitting there waiting for whatever is going to break, and that's really worrisome to me. I get it. I understand why they're so frustrated and so angry, but we shouldn't be at this place. We shouldn't be in a moment where half the population is cheering on the demise of the other half of the population, and that the decent, responsible people, many of whom have military training, are saying, damn, this is becoming very close to what we went and dealt with in Iraq or Afghanistan, where, and I'm not exaggerating, I think we're very, very close to a regular sequence of hostility and violence in the street. And that's a different world than what we've seen before. And at some point it breaks and everybody's in a fight.
I mean, let's face it. The fact of the matter is that we simply are not one people anymore. We're just not.
Diversity's killing us.
Whether
instead of
that
helping
changes
us.
back again at some point is to be seen, to be determined. But we are not one people, and I think we're farther away from each other now than we were in 1776 when we had slavery. I mean, at least then, basically people agreed about the idea that individuals deserve to live their lives on their own terms, and the issue was just saying, hey, yeah, you see those people over there? Yeah, they're people too. But we agreed about the philosophy. And now we have half the country that I think more or less clings to that individualist spirit of the founding, and then the other half the country that wants government to be paternalistic and to be a nanny.
Here's
and
the
to,
problem.
And to be a husband.
We're
else.
celebrating the 250th birthday of America.
Yeah.
And we fought a civil war, a brutal civil war, with hundreds of thousands of Americans killed in it when the population wasn't that big. So it was devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Richmond, of course, where we are, the center of much of that. So it's important for you to study it. I mean, I've kind of been forced to my whole life because this is where I grew up, and I've got dead family members who participated in that war. So I've heard all the arguments. We are at a place where that's going to look like nothing if we don't repair the divide. And we worked so hard post-Civil War to reach that more perfect union.
Yeah.
And I'm terrified that in my lifetime, it's all gonna go to hell. I mean, honestly, I'm not to keep repeating this, but I think I should say it. It's why I left the comfort of being just a commentator on the radio with a decent paycheck and, kind of a half-day work schedule, which was relatively cushy, to actually run for something, because I'm looking at this thinking the whole thing could go off the rails and we could have mass violence. And I've lived in countries where that happened. Truly, I'm not taking a cruise ship and just stopping in and having a cocktail and snapping a photo. Actually lived and worked in countries where there was active civil war conflict, and I see us heading in that direction. I want to try to stop it. Well, I didn't get elected, but here I am back trying to stop that from occurring by, I hope, bringing some reason and some logic and some thought to this and some grace. I'd like to bring, it's tough sometimes, but you got to bring some grace to this.
That's
You wanna
really
bring people back to a good place.
That's really the only recourse that we have, is to try to do better at educating people from the standpoint of civics. But for the time being, the way things are, where we stand right now, these two ends, a government that basically leaves people alone and a government that takes care of everybody's need and want and wish, those are irreconcilable. Those are fundamentally disparate. And until we bridge that gap, unless we bridge that gap, I don't think that things are going to get better.
It's a big problem. All right, we're trying to end on a positive note
Yep.
every day, Dan.
That's right. Yes.
That didn't do it. That did we. All right, I'm gonna have to think. Hold on.
Well, I can think of something. At least for now. At least for the next, I don't know, 7 or 8 hours. There's a big game
Football.
tonight.
No. What's the deal?
The Steelers are not losing yet. You know, that's the mindset of a long-suffering Talmanera Steelers fan. Is it? You know, we're still in it for the time being. But yes, Monday Night Football, 8:15 tonight. I'm excited. You know, Texans at
So I shouldn't
Steelers,
call you at
Acrisure
8:15
Stadium.
to
Well,
talk about the show.
you could call me, but you might encounter a very different Dan who's just a foolish fan at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Well, I'll brace myself for
saying
tomorrow,
things
then.
that I wouldn't say on the air here, and definitely not
Right.
in our WRVA FCC monitor days. But yeah,
Right.
so
Well, listen, there are a
Go
lot
Steelers.
of issues that people are talking about that are pretty important. I've talked to the folks who are very worried about the Supreme Court getting packed with the next Democrat president, whenever that happens. You know, there is the movement, which I find a little bit odd, to anoint J.D. I got nothing against J.D. Vance. I didn't know J.D. Vance when he was named as the vice presidential candidate with Donald Trump, and I think he's done a pretty good job. He's certainly great when it comes to articulating positions in a way that the average person can understand. I think he's doing a great job. But isn't it premature to be anointing him as the nominee? I mean, you're the presumptive nominee because you're the vice president, but I think it's a little odd that everybody's rushing to anoint him as the next nominee. There's time for that. And I do think one of the problems we've got in the country, to Governor Allen's point, everybody gets ahead of themselves. Like, there's a lot of work to be done right now. Republicans in the Congress and Donald Trump himself, I would say this to him. He wouldn't care, but I'd say it to him. You got about 10 months left to do whatever it is you want to try to accomplish. And then you're going to spend the next 2 years just holding on for dear life, trying not to get impeached and not have the Democrats take you out. Because I think we got problems coming, assuming that the current circumstance politically continues. The Republicans better not. Don't worry about 2028.
Yeah, I
Don't
wish
worry
we were
about J.D. Vance. Worry about doing what you promised to do
Right now, right here.
so that your base
Yeah.
feels like, damn, it was worth the effort. It was worth being disinvited from the family dinner, worth being thrown out of the, cards club, worth being cussed out at the polls, worth the money that you may have given to campaigns. It was worth all of that because you've accomplished what you promised to do. And I'm not beating up on the Trump people because I think they're doing a lot of that. And it's really uncomfortable and nasty and unpleasant. But you got 10 more months to get something done. Make that list of 20 items that you're going to attack legislatively or deal with. Man, I don't use the word attack. Deal with legislatively. And let's tick them off and go through them and get it done. And then you get to the point where you're talking about the next presidential election. I don't think anybody should be talking about the next presidential election. I don't think we should
Way
be
too
talking about
soon.
the next governor's election. We don't even have the new governor sworn in
no.
yet. So let's get some work done. And in Virginia, let's make sure we hold the Democrats accountable for, I think, the really bad decisions they're about to make. And then, to Governor Allen's point, the rest should take care of itself, assuming we stay engaged. But that's about as close to positive as I can be on this Monday. All right, Producer Dan, I'm always happy to see you. And I appreciate
It's good to see you too. Yeah.
all your efforts. And we will be back. And we're only 39 minutes over our allotted time today. I'm getting better.
I did put that we would be on until 11:30 today. I figured with
Oh.
the 2 interviews and George Allen
You
being
did.
one of them. So yeah.
All right. Join us tomorrow morning for the Tuesday edition
That's right.
of the Read Revolution. Have a
And
great
like,
Monday.
follow us, subscribe, do all that good stuff on all the socials and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the whole thing.
See you tomorrow.